guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Flow. Yes, I finally caved and watched that goddamn film. Let's talk about it. So yes, this video is being made in reaction to a whole bunch of comments that I received under my videos covering awards season so far. Yes, in my reaction to the Golden Globes as well as the Oscar nominations, I talked about how I really loved The Wild Robot, and I thought it was the perfect candidate for Best Animated Feature for this year. But it seems to be that Flow is the frontrunner even for the Oscar, especially after having won the Golden Globe in the category. And so I expressed my frustration and anger and disappointment over that. But many of you guys said, Jean, listen, you might love The Wild Robot, but you need to give Flow a chance because it is an extraordinary film. And in my Oscar reaction video, I talked about how I had watched the first 10 minutes of Flow, but I hadn't gotten a chance to finish it. Well, today, or rather a few days ago, I finally got a chance to finish the film, and I thought I would hop on and give you guys a full review, a follow-up, after the little comments that I got, to share my thoughts on this Latvian animated film. So if that sounds fun to you guys, then stay tuned. And if you haven't already, of course, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. But now, without further ado, guys, let's get into this. So as I mentioned, Flow is an animated film straight out of Latvia, and one of the reasons why so many people have been championing the film is because it's such an unlikely candidate for these awards. It really has emerged as a surprise awards frontrunner, especially considering the fact that it's come out of this tiny little studio in Latvia. And so because it is an underdog going up against the huge animation giants out of Hollywood like Disney and Pixar and DreamWorks, I think a lot of people have been supporting and championing this film and want it to win, and not only because they feel that the film is spectacular and unique, but also because it's the little movie that could. When it comes to the story of Flow, here you have a film that is centered on this adorable little dark grey cat. I thought it was a black cat, but I checked and it's actually dark grey, and you can see that sometimes throughout the animation. But this cat lives somewhere in the wilderness, in a world that seems to be like a post-apocalyptic world where there aren't any humans around, and you have the ruins of a lost civilization surrounding these animals. But at the beginning of the film, this cat is just kind of living its cute little cat life and it's watching a bunch of these dogs fight over fish, and it's just kind of licking its paw like, what's going on over here? Well, the dogs get distracted and the cat ends up taking the fish, and it looks like the cat is eating well tonight, until there's a bunch of deer that rush by in a stampede, and it turns out they're running away from a huge wave of water because in comes a tsunami wrecking the entire habitat. And so the cat ends up washed away with the water and a whole bunch of animals too, and the whole film is centered on this cat and a collection of animals as they try to survive this huge natural disaster. And so throughout the film, you see the cat kind of meet these different animals, and it's kind of giving Life of Pi basically, where it's trying to survive with them, and you see how they kind of collaborate with one another despite how some of them might be natural enemies and they might not get along in their natural habitats. They put all of that to the side in order to survive, and perhaps throughout this journey they even learn to get along and become this mismatched found family. Now, this film is pretty special for several reasons. I mean, first of all, I already touched on how it comes out of this, small Latvian animated studio, and for this film to become an awards frontrunner, considering the small studio that it comes from, is a really big deal, because we have seen certain studios dominate in this field, especially in Hollywood and in awards season. And so to have this kind of underdog swoop in there and take these awards really says something, and it really says a lot about the quality of the film that they were able to produce, and it actually stood out to the awards voters for it to get to this stage, which is magnificent. And as someone who loves animation and someone who gets really annoyed when people dismiss animation as something that's just for kids, I really like seeing this development, the fact that this new studio has come in there and gotten so much recognition and praise for its work, because it means that the established studios, the big dogs in the field, might feel like the fire is under them, right? Like they might start to, perk up a bit and feel like they have to put their A game up. And I think especially for a studio like Disney/Pixar, this is needed, because they have dominated the animated field for so long now, almost a century, that yes, sometimes it does feel like, and it seems like, they get a little bit lazy. Ooh, like they get a little bit complacent. And so when you do have some newcomers swooping in there and giving us something new and fresh and exciting and actually getting recognized for what they're producing, it does light a fire under Disney's ass and it will hopefully force them to expand and broaden their horizons a little bit more, think outside of the box and continue to innovate rather than resting on their laurels the way that many feel they have been over the last few years. We have seen time and time again that innovation can be born out of competition. So this is very exciting for those of us who are huge fans of animation. The competition is good. I mean, look what happened. Look at what happened post 2018 when we saw Sony Animation come out of nowhere and give us one of the best animated films of all time in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Now, another reason why this film is special is not only because it comes out of Latvia, but it is distinctly different to a typical Hollywood movie that we would get. And a perfect example of this is the characterization of the animals at the center of this story, because these animals are decidedly and distinctly non-anthropomorphic. We have seen time and time again that when there are animals in an animated film, Hollywood always chooses to anthropomorphize these animals, basically giving them human-like, or at the very least dog/cat-like characteristics, so that the human audience, especially the younger audience, can feel like they relate to them a little bit better. That has been a trend across Hollywood for many, many years, and it's something that we often see in their animated films. And even non-animated films, as is the case for like the live action dog movies, like the Bud movies, the Air Bud movies, right? We all remember those from the early 2000s. Those have those same kinds of characterizations for their animal main characters, because that seems to be what the West enjoys. But here we have a complete rejection of that, because Flow gives us animal characters that actually behave authentically to their respective species. We have a cat that doesn't try to behave like a dog or doesn't try to behave like a human. It is, specifically a cat. Like, it is very cat-like. It mews and it moves like a cat, and even its features and the way that it's animated is very distinctly cat-like. And it's the same thing for the dog. It's the same thing for the bird and the lemur. None of these animals feel like they're trying to be human beings, and that is really hammered home by the fact that none of them speak. This film does not have a single word of speech or dialogue, and that is because these animals are being their authentic selves in this film. And that's yet another reason why people have found this film to be special and refreshing amongst the landscape of animated films that are centered on animal characters that are anthropomorphized, because this studio has dared to go against the grain and give us something different. But despite the fact that these animals aren't anthropomorphized, because this film is so well executed, you still get all of the emotions. You still get, the anguish and despair, the fear, the struggle, the worry, as these animals are trying to survive this natural disaster, and they're being tossed and turned around across this whole landscape landscape to all different habitats and environments. We see sneak peeks of the civilization that perhaps used to exist before whatever apocalypse happened to land them in the present day. These animals are able to convey different emotions throughout the film, despite the fact that they don't say a single word. And it's all down to the brilliant visuals and the way that the animals are characterized visually, but also sound-wise. The sound effects matter here, and also in the facial expressions that are very minute and again still authentic to each species, but just enough to convey some of these human-like emotions that we can see in these characters. Now, another thing that makes this film very special is the animation itself. This film is stunning. Yes, it is. Yes, it absolutely is. Guys, the environment in particular, the backdrops, all of the different habitats and environments, and like I said, that fallen city, that forgotten civilization that we get in the middle of the film, stunning. Feast for the eyes, absolutely beautiful. The animation style is very different to the typical animation style that we would see from the big leagues, like a Disney animation or a Pixar, or even an Illumination. Like, they have their own distinct style. I did mention though, in my reaction to the Oscar nominations, that style did remind me a little bit of The Wild Robot. We will discuss The Wild Robot in a second, okay? But the backgrounds did kind of remind me a little bit of The Wild Robot, and I have since rewatched The Wild Robot. Excellent film. We'll discuss, and I do still stand by that. Interestingly enough, there is a little bit of similarity in the way that the background is animated. But I will say, as my first little critique of the film, that whilst I thought that the backgrounds were lush and were a feast for the eyes, I wasn't the biggest fan of the way that the characters themselves were animated. Not gonna lie, I didn't love the way that the animals looked, particularly like the dog and the cat itself. Wasn't the biggest fan of that. I thought the bird was okay, and the lemur kind of reminded me of King Julian, not gonna lie. Like, unfortunately, the lemur kind of reminded me of King Julian the whole time, and not even like King Julian from the films, but like King Julian from the Penguin show. From the Penguins of Madagascar. You know how that animation for the TV show was a little bit scratchier, a little bit cheaper? Yeah, that's kind of what it reminded me of. So yeah, that wasn't great, sorry. And as for the dog and the cat, not gonna lie, I was getting some Nintendogs vibes. Sorry, like, I was getting strong Nintendogs vibes from those mammals. So to me, the characters themselves, they didn't look as nice as the animals that we got in The Wild Robot, but the backgrounds were beautiful. And that scene that was very Life of Pi, where you have that sort of beautiful dreamlike sequence, that was absolutely stunning, like a total feast for the eyes. Okay, so it would seem that after many of you guys told me to watch this film, and after I put up a little bit of a fight due to my allegiance to The Wild Robot, it would seem that I am kind of eating my words just a little bit. Like, I might be eating my words just a little bit, because this film is actually quite excellent. Not gonna lie, I do see what you guys were talking about. It is very endearing, and no, it's not just because you guys are obsessed with cats. I'm so sorry for insinuating. Do I think that this is the best animated film of 2024, deserving of all of the awards, even over The Wild Robots? No. No, sorry, this is where you've got me all the way messed up. No, I do not think that this film is better than Wild Robot. Even with all of what I said before, I still think The Wild Robot is a superior film, and I will quickly explain why. First of all, this film actually bears a lot of resemblance to The Wild Robot. You know, after having watched both films, I was struck by how similar they ended up being. Because as I mentioned, this film is a story of survival. These animals have to survive this incredibly harsh environment that is brought about by a natural disaster. Well, that might sound familiar to those who have watched The Wild Robot, because a similar thing happens in the middle of that film as well. It's not a tsunami. This time around, it's a harsh winter that forces all of the animals that are usually in competition for resources with one another to come together under this home, this dome that Roz built in order to survive the winter. And so you have predators and prey and omnivores and herbivores all coming under one roof, and they have this temporary truce just so that they can make it through the winter. So in that sense, part of the plot of The Wild Robot, there's a striking resemblance to that of Flow. And in fact, The Wild Robot itself is all about Roz, who is this man-made, manufactured robot who was created for a whole different, synthetic environment, and kind of landing herself into this naturalistic environment and being forced to learn whole new languages and reprogram herself entirely so that she can fit in this environment and get along with the animals there. But they are distrusting of her and they don't want anything to do with her because they aren't familiar with what she is, and so it's a really tough battle for her to become integrated in this new environment. So there are definitely similarities to what Roz goes through in The Wild Robot versus what the cat goes through in Flow. But with The Wild Robot, you have that additional layer of the story being about motherhood. Roz isn't just making any old connections with animals. She actually becomes a parent. She becomes a mother to this bird. And so you see how she bends over backwards and breaks herself and just changes her whole entire programming to take care of this bird that literally becomes her son. So I feel like, I'm not gonna lie guys, I feel like The Wild Robot wins because it's able to do the thing that Flow does really, really well, to be fair, but then adds on to it, there's more to it. I also preferred the character designs in The Wild Robot too. I mean, there's no denying that Roz's character design is absolutely stunning. And then you also have the fox and the bird. The character designs in The Wild Robot are just better in my opinion. They don't look like Nintendogs. They don't look like Nintendogs animation, sorry. But I will say that The Wild Robot does do that classic Hollywood thing of anthropomorphizing the animals, giving them human characteristics, and there is dialogue in that movie. If that's something that you're strongly against, then obviously you're going to side with Flow. I do think that is refreshing that Flow kind of turns away from that and rejects that and allows the animals to be authentic to real life animals. But I have to admit, I have to hold my hand up and say that if you're asking me which characters I was more invested in, I would point to the characters from The Wild Robot. I'm sorry, because it's just easier to relate to them. They have different personalities and quirks, and the voice actors are able to convey that through their performances. So yeah, I am more attached to Pedro Pascal's fox character, Fink, from The Wild Robot than I am to the nameless Labrador in Flow. Sorry. So ultimately, I would say I would still go for The Wild Robot as the very best animated film of 2024, but I can hold my hands up and say that I do understand and see the vision when it comes to Flow. And thank you guys for persuading me to watch the film, because I did end up very much enjoying it. So with all of that being said guys, I'm going to be giving Flow a 7.5 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Flow, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this film down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.